been a joy in our house the last week or 10 days to have our family from England here. And so you've met most of them, but there's one you haven't met because she was only going to be a year old tomorrow. So Madeline Evangeline is up in the balcony with her parents, Steve and Angie, Jed and Tally, and we're happy to have them here all the way from Huddersfield, England today. They came for your confirmation, okay? It's been exciting to have 3 young children in the house. It's been sort of a kumbaya moment. Someone's crying, Lord. Kumbaya. Pretty much going on nonstop, so it's been great. Let me read to us from Samuel today. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. And again the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up. He went to Eli and he said, "Here I am. You called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and he lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. It's a tale you've probably heard before. It's almost idyllic in its unfolding. This is a story about a young boy having a dream, but not just any dream, not that classic student dream. Some of you remember it, where you've forgotten to go to a particular class all semester, and now it's the final exam. I have a pastor's version of that dream. The church service has begun. The choir is starting down the aisle in the processional, and I can't find my shoes. Just looking all around. This is a dream in which the Lord himself comes, and he speaks to that boy. And so it makes for a pretty good text for a day like this one, when 17 of our young people who are sitting in the front row are going to be confirmed before their parents and their pastors and the whole church this morning. We don't know exactly how old Samuel might have been. The Jewish historian Josephus said in the 1st century he was about 11 or 12. The word that's used in the Greek, na'ar, can be translated by the term child, that's 44 times, or by the term young man, 76 times. So give or take a year or two, Samuel was probably about the age of all of you in the front row. Likewise, we don't know for sure how long Samuel had been living at the temple, where in gratitude to God for his near miraculous birth, because she had been unable to have children, his mother Hannah had dedicated him to the Lord for his whole life. So chapter 1 tells us. We can guess that he might have been about 3 years old when she brought him to the temple. And if so, then he'd have been under the tutelage of Eli the priest for 8 or more years. Now, don't you feel better about confirmation? It's only lasted 2.5 months. But chapter 3 of this book explains that in those days, the word of the Lord was rare. That is to say, the people of Israel had drifted so far away from God that even if God had been talking, they probably weren't listening. So it's understandable why when Samuel heard the voice in the night, he didn't recognize it as the voice of God. Now, he was living in the same room, sleeping beside the Ark of the Covenant, where the presence of God was supposed to dwell. But he'd never heard the voice. Samuel did not yet know the Lord. That's never really stopped God when it comes to speaking to somebody or using them in his own work. And so after hearing that voice 3 times and telling Eli about it, Samuel finally caught on. He simply responded, "Here I am, speak, your servant's listening." And I wonder if sometimes that's all that stands between you and me hearing God's voice in our lives as well. A simple confession that we're ready to receive whatever he may want to say to us. This is a story about a young person who said yes to the calling of God. Much like in a few moments, each of you who are going to be confirmed will be asked to say yes to the presence of God and your lives too. We should notice that when God spoke to Samuel, Samuel did not know at all what God was going to ask him to do. He just knew that whatever it was, he was willing. In a similar way, God called an old man, 80 years old, a man named Moses, speaking through a burning bush, as our window depicts for us. Moses didn't know exactly all God had in store for him either, but the Lord used an elderly Moses to bring his people out of slavery, and he used a younger Samuel to bring his people out of lethargy and indifference as he spoke to the whole nation of Israel. It wasn't about the ability of either one of them. It was about their availability. It's the same for you and me. This is a story about a dream. This is also a story about a transition, however. One which Walter Brueggemann has suggested was hard, abrasive, and devastating in many ways, at least for the family of the older priest Eli. The voice in the night told Samuel that the old order was passing away and the new order was coming, that the word of God was no longer going to come through his mentor, but now it was going to come through Samuel, the young emerging prophet instead. Now, it wasn't because Eli was old, so old that he could barely see. We said a moment ago, Moses was 80 when he received his call from God. But go back and read the chapter before this one in 1 Samuel. You will discover that far more importantly, somewhere along the way, Eli had lost control of his own family. The very 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were supposed to inherit the priestly office from their father Eli, were, in the words of 1 Samuel 2:12, scoundrels. Literally, they were sons of Belial, it says. That's an expression which means they had no ya'al, they had no value, they had no values. They were worthless, yokeless, destined never to rise, because they had no regard for the Lord. And so even though their family had been promised that its members would minister before God forever, listen to this. God changed his mind. He gave their place to others instead. He transferred the priestly line from one side of the family to the other, to the house of Zadok. Now, this may be a little jarring to some folks. Sometimes we think if we just come to Jesus, maybe at a revival, at a camp meeting, at a walk to Emmaus, sometime in church, maybe if we just come to Jesus, then from that moment on, he is contractually obligated to us to be our Lord. Do you know that he's not? It's a little like finding out colleges, some of you don't know this, colleges can de-admit graduating high school seniors if they slack off too much in the last semester of their senior year. That's unnerving, isn't it? And in the case of Eli's boys, they not only felt what a priest was supposed to do, they were corrupt as well. They treated the Lord's offerings with contempt. They did everything just to satisfy their own desires. And that's why God altered his promise. See, it all boiled down to a simple principle spelled out by God in chapter 2 of this book, chapter 2, verse 30, namely, those who honor me, God says, I will honor. But likewise, those who ignore or despise God will be disdained by him. As you guys come to this place in your young lives today, Padawan, can I tell you, this is perhaps the most important principle you could ever learn. Those who honor God, God will honor. Eric Liddell understood this. Almost 100 years ago, Liddell was one of the fastest men on earth. He was nicknamed the Flying Scotsman, in fact. In 1924, he was selected to represent England, Great Britain, in the Olympic Games that were being held in Paris. But Eric Liddell faced a serious problem as the Games drew near. The race he had been trained to run in, the race where he was his very best, the 100-meter, was scheduled to be run on a Sunday. And being a strong Christian, the son of missionaries back in China, where he had been born, he was actually the world's first Chinese athlete in the Olympics. Eric Liddell refused to run on a Sunday. Eric Liddell thought it was wrong to play sports on a Sunday. Imagine what he would think today. Everyone pressured him to run the race anyway. The rest of the team, the press, the British Parliament, the future King of England, the Prince of Wales came to see him. Eric Liddell wouldn't budge. And then one of his teammates offered to switch races with him so that he could run a different race, a race not being held on a Sunday, the 400-meter. The only problem was Eric Liddell had never run a 400-meter. He hadn't trained for that kind of race. And the world record holders were 2 Americans who were in those games. Liddell threw himself into a quick preparation for that race. Eric Liddell was determined to follow his faith no matter what it took. Look at what happened, at least according to a popular film of a few years ago which told his story, Chariots of Fire. Have a look.
Watch out for Liddell.
Coach says no problem.
He's got something to prove, something personal. Something guys like Coach will never understand in a million years.
Jenny!
says in the old book, he that honors me, I will honor. Good luck, Jackson Schultz. So where does the power come from to see the race to its end? From within. Jenny, I believe God made me for a purpose. But he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure.
Eric Liddell not only won that race and a gold medal for England, he set a world record, 47 seconds. Maybe in 47 days I would make it. But did you catch what he said? Where does the power come from to see the race to its end? It comes from within, from the power God has already put within you. See, as Liddell told his sister Jenny, God indeed made him for a purpose, but he also made him fast. And when he ran, he felt God's pleasure. He understood, if you're not guided by God, you'll be guided by something or someone else. The makers of that film took some license with the story, to be sure. The American writer Jackson Schultz, for instance, says that he never gave Liddell that note. Somebody else did, not on the track, but maybe back in the locker room. That's probably true. But the point still stands, doesn't it? In a like way, I don't know all that God has in store for each of you guys in the days ahead. What I do know is that God made you for a purpose. And if you honor God, God will always honor you. Hopefully you have heard over these past few months of study and preparation, hopefully you have begun to hear the voice of God for yourself. Just as I pray that everyone all around you has already heard God in their own lives too. But today is your day to stand up and say to the Lord, here I am. Speak, for your servant hears. What will you say to him, confirmants? How will you honor God in all the days ahead? In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.